Hello, and thank you for watching A History of Very Little Theatre, 1929 to 2022. I'm Karen Scheeland, and I'm the board president of VLT. I became a member of VLT in 1969. I was 23. Since then, I've seen a lot of changes in my 53-year membership, but the essence of VLT has remained the same. A place welcoming community members to be a part of VLT, whether to act, work, front or backstage, or as a supportive audience member. Theatre involvement equates with forming memories, friendships, and self-awareness. Being in A Chalk Garden by Enid Bagnall, who wrote National Velvet, directed by Melina Neal and had Yerda Brown, who had a signature French roll hairdo always in place, was illuminating as an actor. Directing A Man for All Seasons with a strong male cast, or Steel Magnolias with a compassionate and funny female cast. But I think if I had to say what was most enjoyable was directing Perfect Wedding, when every rehearsal was a laughing festival. Here we are now on the brink of finishing the much-needed remodel of our 70-year-old theatre to step into the future with a remodeled business structure to attract more community involvement and support. We hope you've enjoyed this special presentation as part of our 93rd anniversary. And we will be celebrating throughout the month of March. So I hope you'll join in with some of our other presentations. Thank you.
On March 3, 1929, a small group of theater enthusiasts gathered to create a new theater troupe in Eugene. One of the attendees, Florence Shoemaker, remarked, "There are hundreds of little theater groups up and down the country, but this is certainly going to be a very little one." The Very Little Theater's first production was in the Heilig Theater at the north end of Willamette Street in downtown Eugene. The Heilig, originally built as a vaudeville and opera house, was at that point in the business of showing movies and occasional touring shows. Despite an awkward rehearsal schedule and high cost of renting space at the Heilig, the VLT's first production, You and I, by Philip Barry, made a profit of $4.51. Unfortunately, the next three productions were not as successful, and the fledgling theater group knew they had to find a more affordable facility. The year and a half at the Heilig could hardly be termed a failure, however. Although the theater was in debt, the group had grown rich in experience, and they left with a clearer idea of what they wanted to do. Their early economic challenges made them even more determined to succeed, and it was that characteristic that would contribute to their success in later years. From 1931 to 1935, the VLT did what most community theaters do. They leased a building and converted it into a makeshift performance space. In this case, it was a little drugstore near the University of Oregon campus called the Pillbox. The rent was $10 a month, and the VLT's first production there was a melodrama, 10 Nights in a Barroom. A notable performer in this show was Edgar Buchanan, a Eugene dentist who years later went to Hollywood and became a well-known character actor. Perhaps his best-known role was Uncle Joe in the TV sitcom Petticoat Junction. Buchanan was both an actor and director at VLT for several years. 10 Nights in a Barroom was the first of many melodramas, or corn shows, that would prove so popular and profitable to VLT in the coming years. Many of the other plays produced at the Pillbox were literary classics, featuring works by Chekhov, Ibsen, Wilde, and their contemporaries. The biggest challenge at the Pillbox was its small space. The proscenium opening was 16 feet by 12 feet, and the stage was only 12 feet deep. Resourceful VLT members fashioned curtains out of flour sacks, and the lighting equipment included dimmers set in a galvanized bucket. The first 4 rows of seats initially were made from wooden packing cases. The seating capacity ranged between 95 and 100 people. Because there was little money to pay for renovation of the pillbox, members were faced with doing the work themselves. As a result of this activity, competent electricians, carpenters, and painters developed within the membership. But more importantly, a feeling of camaraderie grew out of this period, which gave the organization strength through the years. In 1935, with a small nest egg in the bank, the VLT moved to an old exhibition hall at the Lane County Fairgrounds called The Barn. With a seating capacity of 275 and an annual rent of $60, the barn was much more suited to VLT's purposes. But the roof leaked, the wood stove was the only heat, and the building was badly in need of repairs. The renovation exhausted VLT's bank account, but by the following year they were again in the black and attracting larger audiences than ever. In addition to having larger audiences in attendance, VLT realized that they now came from a broader section of the Eugene community. As the makeup of the audience and membership changed, there was also a shift in the type of plays the VLT produced. Instead of literary drama favored by the university crowd, the VLT began producing light commercial comedies from Broadway. The success of commercial comedies continued through the 1940s, interspersed with melodramas, classical works, and original scripts by VLT members. Another important change during the years at the fairgrounds was that the VLT members began planning a full season in advance. Prior to that, a member simply expressed a wish to direct a play, and if it was approved by the board, the play was produced. A significant operational change was also made during the fairgrounds era. Spouses of members were automatically accepted into membership, which brought the group closer together, as couples participated jointly in the theater's business and social functions, and their children were often included in the annual picnics and Christmas parties. The World War II years presented several challenges, most notably the lack of young men to play roles and help with set construction. But rather than stop entirely, the VLT membership decided to cut back to just 2 or 3 productions a year. During the 4 years of the United States involvement in World War II, the VLT produced 12 plays, an average of 3 a year. Even during the war years, the members never lost sight of their long-range goal: to build their own theater. Thanks to their diligence and frugality, VLT emerged from the war with more than $1,100 saved, and they began to work on finding their permanent home. Since many of VLT's early members were small business owners in the community, VLT operated on very sound, thrifty fiscal management, and those business connections paid off. One member, Claire Hamlin, was an architect who designed VLT's new home. Friends of VLT members in the timber industry donated the lumber to build the theater, including the iconic cedar arches. Another member, Fred Cuthbert, a landscape architect at the UO and for whom Cuthbert Amphitheater is named, designed VLT's original landscaping. Another key figure in VLT's early history was Bill Tugman, who was one of VLT's founding members, an actor and director, and editor of the Register Guard. Just about every VLT production in those early years got reviewed in the Guard, and Bill even wrote editorials applauding this young theater group and what a great addition they were to the community.
The Very Little Theater holds 12 membership meetings a year, usually on the first Sunday of each month. Here are some typical moments and familiar faces.
In June 1950, the VLT began the construction process on their current building at 2350 Hilliard in South Eugene. 200 seats were installed, and a workshop, dressing rooms, and a green room were added a few years later. As one VLT member wrote in 1950, "It is not the handsomest or most costly community theater in the world, but it is a real community theater because it has been created out of the spirit that makes Eugene." The VLT bought the land from the city of Eugene for $3,000 and borrowed $5,000 to help pay for construction. They paid off the loan in 1953. The VLT members have made numerous changes and improvements to their building over the following decades. Larger restrooms, a new box office, improved stage rigging, and in 1992 they completed the largest capital improvement before the current renovations. Stage left, providing rehearsal space, room for studio productions and social events, along with a new kitchen and additional restrooms. In 2015, the VLT board decided that it was time to finally renovate the theater. Since VLT has always had very low overhead costs, all income was generated from ticket sales, unusual for a community nonprofit theater, and they had not had to engage in formal fundraising before. They began setting aside $2 from each ticket to go toward the building fund, and they set out several possibilities for the upcoming renovations. They contracted fundraising consultant Casey Woodard to conduct a feasibility study, educate volunteers about raising money, and create a capital campaign plan. In the beginning phases of the capital campaign to raise the funds for the project, member support was vital. On July 23, 2017, VLT members were invited to an exclusive members-only barbecue and silent auction, where members were invited to sponsor a seat in the new house, which was only available to members at the time. 17 seats were sponsored that day, and $44,851.82 was raised, demonstrating the strong commitment that members had to the renovations and the capital campaign. The first indicator of strong community support came in December 2016, when local theater lovers and philanthropists Herb Merker and Marcy Hammock donated $100,000 to the campaign. VLT could now show that members and non-members alike were dedicated to the success of the theater and building for the future. Key volunteers from this time include Scott Barkhurst, who solicited past members and volunteers for seat sponsorships, James Aday, who played a large part in carrying out events to raise awareness for the capital campaign, as well as researching grants and other streams of income. Karen Scheeland served as board president from 2015 until 2022, leading the theater through the hardest parts of the renovations and capital campaign, as well as many of the operational changes that were being implemented. Carrie Welch served as fundraising coordinator, one of VLT's first paid staff positions, and coordinated many of the volunteer efforts and fundraising activities. From February 2017 to February 2018, VLT fundraisers held 7 tea and coffee, wine and cheese parties, and luncheons to invite patrons and community members to learn about the project. They were attended by over 50 community members and resulted in several 5-figure gifts, showing the ongoing commitment and dedication from the community. In 2019, VLT embarked on the next phase of fundraising, including a public unveiling of the capital campaign, trips to the state capitol to talk to state lawmakers, and raising awareness with local politicians and leaders. VLT also embarked on a rewrite of their bylaws and governance structure, bringing the board makeup closer to one of a governance board, more typical to a nonprofit, rather than the working board that had been running the theater all along. As they raised money, VLT leadership struggled with the need to close their doors for the renovations, since they were replacing the full house of seats, demolishing and moving several of the walls in the lobby and house, and repainting many of the surfaces inside and outside the theater. There would be a period of many months that VLT would be unable to produce shows or bring audiences into the theater at all. Like many theaters, the VLT had to shut down in-person performances in March 2020 due to the COVID-19 global pandemic. Thanks to dedicated volunteers led by Russell Dyball, VLT pivoted to offering streaming theater options right away, and the virtual Little Theater was born. The first virtual show premiered July 3rd, 2020, and there are more than 30 videos uploaded to the VLT YouTube channel today, showing the creativity and resourcefulness of VLT members and volunteers in the face of adversity. With audiences absent from the theater, it was the perfect time to finally embark on the renovations that VLT had been planning on for years. Volunteers led the initial demolition in the fall of 2020, removing the old seats, ripping down most of the interior walls in the theater, and removing all of the equipment, sets, and props from storage under and behind the stage. In June of 2021, McLean Construction successfully won the bid to begin construction on the new building. Work began immediately, and official groundbreaking was planned for June 27th. Unfortunately, Eugene hit triple-digit heat that weekend, and the ceremony was pushed to July 11th. Over 150 guests attended the in-person ceremony, with another 20 or so tuning in on the live stream. Mayor Lucy Vinnis gave a short speech, and Council Member Matt Keating and State Senator Floyd Przansky were in attendance. After the ceremony, guests were invited to the north parking lot where donated ice cream from Lockmead Farms was served by the board and volunteers, along with a variety of sundae toppings. Project manager Rich Scheeland and architect Otto Patisha led several tours through the new construction site and have continued to lead hard hat tours of the site on weekends as construction progressed. Throughout 2021, fundraising for the renovations continued. Over $1 million had already been raised before the official groundbreaking ceremony, and volunteers mounted several successful virtual fundraising events to reach the final $1.7 million goal. Raise the Roof in March 2021 was hosted by Russell Dyball and VLT's new development and marketing coordinator, Jessica Ruth Baker, and featured a tour of the newly gutted building, as well as an incredibly successful silent auction filled with homemade pieces made from the cedar siding removed from the lobby. Carrie Welch created and coordinated Raise the Roof and continued to serve as fundraising committee chair for the rest of the year, leading new fundraising efforts and donor involvement. While the original plan was to reopen in February of 2022, delays and shutdowns due to supply chain issues stemming from the pandemic made it impossible for construction to be completed in time. Recognizing that there may be additional delays, VLT leadership decided to postpone their opening to August of 2022 to start a complete season with the long overdue Little Women the Musical, which had been closed down on opening night on March 13th, 2020. The new theater will feature wider, more comfortable seats, expanded legroom, more accessible seating, and extended playing space on each side of the stage. The audience extends into what used to be the stage, and the entire stage house was relocated further to the west to accommodate a new fly house for scenery and the extra space needed for audience. The catwalk was removed and reinstalled to match, and new walls were constructed to create gallery spaces on either side of the audience. The iconic VLT arches are untouched, however, and the new design highlights their grandeur and history. As VLT has grown, they have also recognized the need to open their doors wide to members of the community who might not have previously felt comfortable in a mainstream theater space. Carol Dennis and Stanley Coleman founded Minority Voices Theater in 2017, and after several successful performances, decided to join forces with VLT. Minority Voices Theater got a home and a way to offer tax-deductible donations, and VLT had an active community outreach tool that helped VLT get closer to their goals of being as diverse and as welcoming as possible. The Readers Theater Players, currently headed by Claude Offenbacher, brings radio theater, skits, and jokes to nursing homes and care facilities around Eugene and Springfield, offering acting and directing opportunities to people who may not have time for a fully staged show, but still want to perform on a regular basis. The virtual Little Theater, while spawned during the pandemic out of necessity, plans to continue to host experimental theater in unusual formats and spaces. In August 2021, Ministers of Grace, a Shakespearean adaptation of Ghostbusters, was produced in the north parking lot of VLT for 2 nights of performances. Over 300 audience members came between the 2 days, and though it was completely free to attend, cash and online donations surpassed $1,500. Although paused during the pandemic, VLT has been giving scholarships to theater students at UO and LCC every year for more than 30 years. Auditions and backstage positions are open to all who are interested. And volunteers are always reminded that if you don't know what to do, we can teach you. VLT has continued to grow operationally and physically, expanding their governance structure to include an interim executive director starting in November 2021, and keeping their eyes on the horizon for bigger and better opportunities for the theater to grow. While the finances and operations may have changed to keep up with the times, the spirit of what makes VLT so special is unchanged. It is a theater where the doors are open to all, and it will always grow out of the hard work and dedication of the community. When the founding members gathered in 1929 to create the Very Little Theater, did they know that close to a century later, the theater would not only still exist, but thrive? We will never know what they expected the future to hold. But the legacy of VLT is without question, and the love and dedication its members, volunteers, and audiences have will continue to ensure the Very Little Theater's growth for decades to come.